We're not
Got a
allowed
good
to.
thing coming, and it's all I need. Everything I wanted.
I now understand how much that hurts because I'm normally not wearing headphones.
The audience
loud.
is now deaf.
Everyone is awake.
I will finally fix that for next week.
What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? It's Better Buy Bitcoin. The whole gang's here, plus J.M. Bush writes. We're talking about Hollywood. Talking about the movie business. If you've watched previously, you know that all of us here are involved in the movie business, especially Jordan Bush. Prophetic career. He's out. He's gone.
No, he's gone.
And he's gone.
He might have crashed his
Dead
car.
zone. Oh, here we go.
He's
back.
back.
Oh, good.
And he's back.
Jordan, where are you driving right now?
I'm driving in an undisclosed location because we don't dox ourselves.
That's right.
Sure looks like
It's a lot like
Sure looks like North America.
someone get AI on this stat.
Yeah, somebody get that dude who can, diagnose stuff. If you show him a leaf, he knows right where you are.
He carries his keys in his rectum, so just get him, pull him out. Anyway, we're gonna be talking. Do we do it? You want to do an intro again, JD, like usual? JD, introduce yourself.
Yeah. JD, Bitcoin ad guy. I love making ads. What about you, Bondor?
Bondor, Gilded Plebe. I've been around Bitcoin for a bit. I've had a career. I'm really trying to just nail this thing, this little intro piece. So here's what I got working on so far. I've had a career in finance, entertainment, education, and the last one is engineering. And I've seen how fiat can ruins all of it. And I've burned a lot of bridges to get here, but I'm set on Bitcoin redeeming it all. So that's what I'm
Anton?
working on right now.
Anton Syme, my ex bio just says film in Bitcoin. That's enough.
Bush.
Can you guys see me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's telling me I'm backstage. It's
Loud
telling me
and
I'm
clear.
backstage. Anyhow, so I am the executive director of TGFB Media. We help Christians understand and use Bitcoin for the glory of God and the good of people everywhere. I was a missionary pastor, and now I help people understand Bitcoin full time.
Dope.
That's the way you do a bio.
Perfect.
Hey,
Yeah, I need to work on mine.
Pike, rock and roll.
I'm Corey Pike. I'm co-founder of IndieHub.studio and Hollywood film and television producer.
Dope. I'm Zach, founder of IndieHub.studio. I've worked in film and TV pretty much my whole career, and here we are. So today's topic, we're going to talk a little bit about AI and filmmaking. I just went to the International AI Film Festival over this last weekend, and I don't know, man, lots to report. I went in kind of nervous, like this is either going to be the most cringe thing I've ever been a part of, or I'm going to lose my job tomorrow. It's sort of one or the other. And to be honest, it was a little bit of both. It wasn't really cringe, but I was shocked. I was honestly shocked at how far along this tech has come. I've just sort of avoided the topic, just out of general. A, it takes a lot of time to like dive into this stuff, but B, it's a little bit scary. I mean, AI has been really effective in a lot of other ways. I've been using it myself quite a bit for various activities, and I have to say that kind of coming out of it, I do think that we're on the precipice of a new medium, and it is moving faster than anybody could really imagine, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Anton, you got any questions? Can you lead me around?
Yeah. It seems like we're in an exponential growth phase of AI. Yeah, I mean, tell us about the festival that you went to. Were there, was it people who have made short films who are like showing the films just like a normal film festival, or was it more of a expo type of thing?
Yeah, so I'm traditional film festival. They kind of did 3 short blocks over at the Los Feliz Theater across from Fred 62. And the vibe I got, I only did the third block, so I wasn't there the whole day. I did an hour, and then I listened to one of the panels they did. And what it seemed like to me is really you had a bunch of filmmakers in there, kind of traditional filmmakers. They had the Zoom going, so they had people from all over the world, and some of the filmmakers zooming in. You know, this one woman from Korea, she's teaches film in Korea, so you know, filmmaker, professor. You had people from USC in our industry, kind of teaching film, working on AI. You know, people who run production companies out here have been in traditional docs, narratives, people who work at studios, some other people who are just massive AI enthusiasts, but honestly, mostly filmmakers, mostly people who are somewhat familiar with the business.
I've been noticing that in the film world, just like in so many things, it's kind of easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. And I think a lot of studios and a lot of filmmakers have treated AI this way. I mean, take that, you had the Roadrunner, the Anthony Bourdain movie. I watched that whole movie. I knew that they had used his voice at some point and done like an AI. I forgot about it completely. I watched the whole movie and I was like, wait a second, there was AI voiceover in that. And it might have been the whole movie. I don't even know. And then Peter Jackson did that World War I movie where he took little square, like 8mm film and made it into widescreen 35mm 4K. Then he did the one with the Beatles where they didn't even know what the guys were saying. They went and recreated their voices and made it 4K. So you could actually hear what they were saying in their voices, and there wasn't even audio of it. I just saw that they took an 80s sitcom and they upscaled it to 1080, and it's supposedly horrifying because like little girls who are in the background look like bald men and all kinds of weird stuff like that. So anyway, all that's just to say that AI is being used no matter what you're hearing, because you're hearing a lot of people say that, oh, we're not going to allow it in Hollywood because it'll kill the film industry. And like, no, it's been being used for years.
Yeah. So
what are some of the ways that you see things going in the short term?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. It's like any new tech, right? You had, a lot of the discussions and panels, we were talking about regulation, talking about unions, the last contract negotiations. Warner Brothers, supposedly was like, oh, we're not going to use AI. And, the unions kind of won that argument. But like, of course they are. They're going to go create another division or whatever that wasn't in the contract and do whatever the fuck they were doing anyway. I'll say this and then I'll get more specific. I've said this to you guys in different contexts, but I think that, we as a species, we entered the information age. And I think very rapidly a byproduct of us entering the information age is that the actual age we're in is the age of discernment. And being able to discern the truth out of a massive amount of noise and possibly fake visuals and fake information and lies is going to be the defining factor of our time, because this stuff is incredibly difficult, especially if you're looking at it on a two-dimensional screen, or you're looking at, information coming from a screen, to discern what the truth is. It's remarkable and moving quickly. I would say, in 2008, the industry went through a similar transition. You had politics, technology, and economics sort of collapse it, and whole new businesses were born. I mean, YouTube stars weren't a thing 20 years ago, and they're a thing today. And I think that we're going to see an entirely new category of filmmaker come out. I saw some remarkable stuff done over a matter of weeks. I will say, though, that the tools themselves I'm convinced of this, are going to remain tools, and that the artist is going to be the most important part. You're using these tools to tell stories. You're using these tools to convey something that is uniquely human, and human beings will connect to things that are uniquely human, and they won't to things that aren't. So I think that creativity, raw creativity, is going to be more valuable than ever. One way to look at it, I was having this conversation with somebody recently, like, to make a movie, let's say just go back to celluloid days. Let's go back to 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Making a movie was an incredibly expensive, technical, drawn out process. And a lot of people made their living by being willing to do the technical shit that really creative people weren't willing to do. Like, I'm going to go learn how to mix sound. I'm going to go learn how to do color on a DaVinci. I'm going to learn how to do this hyper technical thing that a director, which is really God on a movie set, or should be, wasn't really interested in doing. And so these massive industries were built doing all of this technical stuff that creative people didn't really want to do to tell a story. I would say that almost all of that, at least as far as if you're saying you're going to go make an AI movie, like, that's out. There's still room to be technical, but more importantly than anything is, can you be specific and can you tell a good story? Do you know how the structure of story works? Can you build tension, and can you release it in the right ways and at the right moment, at the right beat? Do you have characters that people can relate to? Do you have a story that's relevant to human beings? So I think a bunch of technical people are going to be out, and I think a bunch of other people that would have never been able to get into the industry because of this spider web of technicians are going to be able to tell stories that would have never been told before. And that's really just from the creative side. I mean, from the social media, we can go make a visual that looks like things that are actually happening. For example, one of the things that always gets people with Trump is a lot of the leftists are like, oh God, he said that Nazis are great people, and he told everybody to drink bleach, and I'm like, he literally fucking did not. Pull up a video that said that shows him telling people to drink bleach, and they can't do it because it doesn't fucking exist. But with this tech, zero question that those videos will start to exist. And we're going to start to get really fucking confused from a news media perspective. But I do think we got to delineate, storytelling and filmmaking from the other stuff. But the thing that's confusing in the middle there is like the documentary side of things. Like, one of the guys who won most of the awards, really cool dude, talked to him all night. His film was called Lincoln at Gettysburg, and he basically did the Gettysburg Address with Lincoln giving the speech, and of course it's all AI generated, and he had all this B-roll of the war and combat and just really, really well done stuff, and it conveys a message, and it has a point. But we're going to get to a point where you're like, fuck, man, like, was that Lincoln at Gettysburg? A kid growing up in 25 or 30 years from now, you're not going to know what an old photo, the real photo, was versus what you're seeing on a screen.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. From the storytelling perspective, I'm curious if anybody has a really negative take on where they think that filmmaking and like the film industry and storytelling is going in the near future. If you have a negative take.
Hyper negative.
I would be curious to just piggyback on the last comment that Zach made, and it's I don't necessarily know if filmmaking is we're going to have the problem. I think the problem we're going to have is media, and by that I mean like mass psychosis. Like, this is essentially MK Ultra in real time, and it's I think one of the things that we're seeing with all the stuff coming out about the JFK files potentially and like Epstein stuff.
Yeah.
What's going to be really interesting is what's actually real. Like, the wild part to think about with like the Epstein stuff that hasn't come out, are they making stuff up to plant on people? Like, we're in this world now where verifiability of core, or rather first research, I'm blanking on what is it, the actual witnesses, like, of actual valid sources of like the source material. That's what I'm looking for. Like, source material verifiability is so challenging with digital stuff. That's why the Dead Sea Scrolls are so important as a text for history, not even just Christianity, but like for history, is it's a thing that they've found a bunch of times over. And now on the internet, if I want to make a picture of a dick butt, it's immediately verifiable as a dick butt everywhere. But like, who made the original dick butt? Who cares? Like, I don't know. It's interesting. So
if they were to
negative
release
take is
Epstein
reality
files
is
right
hard.
now, if they were just to release those files right now, would you even believe any of them? Like if they released videos of Epstein that were like evidence videos, would you believe any of them?
This is the challenge, is honestly, I don't know. Like the funny thing is too, we know this tech has existed since the Obama era because they kept saying in the 2016 election, watch out for deep fakes. And so this tech has been around for a long time, and they've been trying to tell people, don't believe your lying eyes, rightfully, but don't believe your lying eyes for a long time. But I do think it wasn't as good back then, for sure. And so I think a lot of it was kind of air cover for them to be able to like have crap, like shady, malicious stuff come out, and then for them to be like, oh, this is fake. I think now it would actually be fake. And so to your point of like,
Yeah, now
5
it's
years ago,
democratized.
yeah, 5 years ago, I would have believed him. Now, when they do come out, I'm gonna have questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think you think of something like the Steele dossier, right? Where they're like, oh, strippers and like sex tape with Trump. You're just like, they could convincingly make that tape
Yeah.
down and like just
Oh, yeah.
drop it on some site somewhere, and people would be like, oh, like, and again, it just would
I
be
think the Door brothers already did.
yeah, sure, yeah. But I just think, I mean, yeah, there's just so many terrifying ways that this could go. Like I would love to ask Corey, like, is this, or not Corey, Zach, is kind of your take, because I've talked to programmers who are looking at ChatGPT and these other tools, and they're basically like, their kind of takeaway, which is kind of my realization, was it's not going to eliminate the jobs of people who know what they're doing. People who are already know what they're doing are going to be able to learn how to use these AI tools, and they're going to be way more productive. Like, is that kind of what your takeaway is as well on the film front, in addition to like the novel stuff that's going to happen, the novel tools in just normal people's hands?
Yeah, I think that same thing that happened in 2008, the pile of shit at the bottom is going to get massive.
Yeah.
It's going to get absolutely huge, but the cream always rises. I think it'll take, years, if not a decade and a half, to kind of settle a workflow for it. But I think that voices and brilliant storytellers globally, people that would have never in a million years had an opportunity to tell good stories, will have an opportunity to tell good stories. And the big budget live action kind of projects, I think that those will dwindle. I think ultimately the market is going to expand. Like people are always afraid, oh, is this going to take jobs? Is this going to take jobs? Like, no, this is going to blow up this industry in terms of a dollar amount by multiple times. It's going to take a while to settle, but projects that could have never been greenlit before are going to start getting greenlit. So, it's just, you got to deal with the pile of crap at the bottom, and people who are going to get fatigued by that. Audience members are going to be like, oh, it's just like too much shit to watch. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
Can I actually? I want to actually to you, Corey. I actually want to tap on that. Like, as somebody who's done development and knowing there's new access for people with these tools, like, how do you see the landscape changing over the next 5-10 years, especially now having been in like Italy for a while? Like, what's the how do you see this revolution like bringing about like a new renaissance in filmmaking, and like what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at a film budget, the things that are the most costly, that don't show up the most on screen, are a lot of the things that AI addresses. Like, sound is insanely expensive, and AI cleaning up of sound has gotten so much better. And from my perspective, on an independent film, do I need 3 sound guys now? No, I probably need 1, right? Those are the types of things that I see. VFX is like this massive thing. When you walk into an animation project, that's like 60%, 70% of your budget is just like paying animators and computer generated things. Those things the computers are being used for those things anyway. And I think you're just going to see a massive reduction in cost in those sorts of things. And those are all kind of below the line type things. All of those things, all of that tech, all of that work is in support of a creator vision. So from a Hollywood film perspective, AI is doing absolutely nothing, in my opinion, to remove the director and the writer as being the center of the film medium. It's just slowly and surely and increasingly fast making it easier for them to get their vision out there. So, Zach, I agree with you in one sense that the pile of crap at the bottom will grow. But I would say if you asked any of your people who aren't in Hollywood at all, how much are you actually watching, right? At peak television, at the peak fiat nonsense of printing money and sending it into Hollywood, just inventing value out of nowhere and pretending that the industry was as big as it was. We made, I think it was 700 TV shows at the peak of that year. And then there were about 14,000 movies. And how many did you watch, right? And I'm in the industry and it's my job to stay on top of all that stuff. And I probably watched 120 movies that year and maybe 30 series, right? And I watch an enormous amount of stuff for my job, which means 99% of everything that was made, I didn't watch as a professional in the industry. And if that number just grows at the bottom, it's just nonsense, right? I think about old movies, and I watch a lot of old movies, and watching like Rashomon or Die Hard or Heat or some other movies, and you go back and watch them now and you say, oh, that's a little cliche. Some creator figured out that this is a formula that works, right? Rashomon invented the unreliable narrator, and Die Hard made the modern pacing for an action movie. They're the first one to figure that out. And then since then, there's been thousands of people who can't come up with that level of idea on their own, recreating it and just like reproducing it based on a formula that someone else figured out. Some of those movies are fine. Most of them are absolute garbage. I think AI is going to allow for that sort of recreation to happen, but I think it will allow the people that actually want the next thing, whatever the next generation is going to do, people aren't going to stop looking for that next thing, that next creator voice. So I think I see the bottom of the pyramid getting really big, but it's just a bigger mess of cheaper nonsense, right? Like the Hallmark movie has just been imitating the rom-coms that worked from 30 years ago. I think that's just going to keep growing, that mess at the bottom. I don't think it really does anything at all to remove the fact that the creators that figure out the next formula that works for the next generation are incredibly necessary and incredibly central to being culturally responsive.
Yeah, I agree. I the cream always rises. And ultimately the market is doing what the market does, and it's opening it up to competition. That's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. Like, it was a very closed system because you had this highly technical spider web that was in the way of doing the producing, and really a lot of people who are creative got edged out. And they're not going to be edged out. They're going to be attacking this with a vengeance. And yeah, I think there's going to be some revolutionary stuff going on. From a story structure standpoint, there's going to be more. We're going to be able to iterate faster and faster and faster, and we'll see what works faster and faster and faster. But I think, I would say for sure that, the Hollywood that we grew up with, and, I think it's dead. It's done. It's over. It might have a few last gasps, but, yeah, it's pretty remarkable what they're up to.
There's so I've been watching the Star Wars in timeline order, and not that I recommend you do this, but I'm just like, wish I was just going to do it. But watching a timeline order is fascinating because all of these series and TV shows, like a half dozen TV shows with multiple seasons, came out, and then they are before and after the original movies. And if you watch these series, you see character development, you see like a whole like not just character development, but like the group's character gets developed, and you get to see how their friends are and how they interact with their world and like all this other stuff. And then you watch the original 3 Star Wars movies, and it's like, what is this? This feels like almost an insult to the audience, because you're like, Luke goes through this thing where, and I'm going to butcher this specific example, but it's something like he flies a plane one time, and then he's the best pilot that anyone's ever seen. And then he blows up the Death Star.
But his metachlorian count is super high. We all know this, dude.
But they don't even develop
why.
it. It's not his metachlorian count. It's that every single other person in the entire fleet of Rebels recognizes that Luke is the best pilot they have after flying one time. And you're just like, that's not human at all. It's just pure 1970s storytelling. And the point I'm trying to get to is that with AI, you're going to have this crazy amount of breadth to actually like dig into characters, because all of that garbage that you had to produce, like, to the garbage, right? All of the set design and everything else that you had to put together to get all these characters to fill out all of these seasons is just going to be so much easier. And that goes, Corey, it's the same thing with what's the big screen that everyone shoots on now? It's like
wall.
LED wall, right? Like, instead of doing these crazy practical sets, you just do an LED wall, and then you're like, okay, cool, we got an entire world, and the person can interact with that world, to some degree, and then, okay, cool, we can flush out this whole broader, deeper thing. And I see that happening with AI as well, but in a different capacity. It just makes it more accessible.
It kind of has this interesting blend of, there's going to be like this weird middle ground where it's not animation and it's not live action. I saw a few of these movies at the fest that like really, really blended the two well. And some of them went like full animation style. They had their own visual, totally their specific, book. Other ones tried to be hyper real, but you're still going to have this.
I wasn't interested in that, Zach.
Fuck you. Yeah, it's definitely going to blend a lot of genres, and it'll be interesting to see like what genres come out of AI and what ones are the most specific. What ones are the best? What is AI the best genre as a tool for, if that makes sense?
Anton, I'm curious your take on, like, I would argue Breaking Bad is the best series ever made, and people can fight me on that one, but I really think they did a phenomenal job. But the main reason is the best job they did was on the page. Like, Vince Gilligan was interviewed over and over again. He would say, like, the goal was to paint ourselves into a corner. And I'm just really curious your take on, do you think we're going to get to a place where it's going to be harder to do that because of AI? Because like people are not painting themselves in a box. Like, is story going to suffer, or is it going to change? Because I feel like the way we understand stories not going to change. Like, that's just a human thing.
Yeah. Corey was saying how he basically was saying that all art is derivative, and essentially somebody makes this first thing that's kind of new, and then it's successful. And so a lot of people copy it. And, like a year ago, 2 years ago, I heard people saying, oh, AI will never make things as good as a human being. It seems more like we basically were being AI. We were just doing it really, really slowly. And we were just copying and copying and copying and making worse copies of the thing. And then every once in a while, something new would come out. And, we're talking about these different ways that AI can be used. Right now, AI can make really great animation. It's already great for that. Or it can fill in little gaps and things. But then we're talking about volume stages. There's ways that you could just film somebody without a volume stage, and AI can add the lighting to their face, can change the background. Or like, personally, I'm doing a project right now where I needed a mountain lion in the background, like walking through the trees. So kind of far in the background. I can film a real shot, have the mountain lion put into the background. No one will be able to tell. If this was a year ago, I would have had to pay some VFX house to make a 3D rendering of a mountain lion, or to do some sort of rotoscoping and take a shot of a mountain lion from like a nature documentary and place it in the trees. And I can
just get a practical mountain lion. Why would you not just use a practical real mountain lion? What's the problem?
You want to hear a funny story about that real quick? Because there's a guy, his name's Wolfgang Bayer. He was a nature documentarian back in like the 60s and 70s. They used to fake all the nature documentaries. So they would pretend that Death Valley was the Serengeti. And so they wanted to get this shot of a mountain lion, like, who was like starving to death and was drinking. But the mountain lion was kind of fat and out of shape. It was just what they had available to him. So they drove him out to Death Valley. They completely dehydrated the mountain lion. And then they like made a puddle, and they released the mountain lion so it would go and drink. And they're like, it doesn't really work. It's kind of fat, but whatever. People will buy it. Right as they did this, a family pulls up in a station wagon, jumps out of the car, and is like, "Whoa, a mountain lion!" The mountain lion turns, looks at one of the kids, and instinct takes over, and the mountain lion attacks one of the kids and mauls him. Didn't kill him, but I want to say it was Disney too who did it. So this kid got like $2 million in a lawsuit from the Nature documentary.
I'm going to
anyway,
confirm that so we don't get sued, but yes, we will confirm that it was Disney. If not, we're sorry.
I'm pretty sure. The book is called A Wild Life by Wolfgang Bayer. It's really good. But we don't have to do stuff like that anymore.
One thing, pose this question to the group. One of the things that I was thinking about in the Film Fest was that becomes really apparent, and kind of to what you guys are saying, is like all of this shit was fake anyway. There's the best definition of acting I ever heard is that you're behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And the thing that was magical about movies back in the day is there was this magician-like quality to trick us into believing that a thing was happening. When Jurassic Park came out, it was like, holy fucking shit, this is real. And one of the things that just has been an abject failure as far as I'm concerned with CGI is they're not even really trying to trick us. They're like, the magician craft has sort of gone, and everybody accepts, oh, it's computer generated, and we just make it the most cool, outlandish explosion we can imagine. But there's real magic in looking at something and being like, holy fucking shit, how did they do that? And one of the probably like the most disappointing thing about the AI thing, maybe the most negative take to your previous question, Anton, is like, that mystery is gone. And that was such a huge part of the movie watching experience when things were live action and they were able to put something on a camera that you, like pre-CGI, that you knew had to be real to some extent, but you also know it's an illusion of some kind. I mean, this is what the original silent movies were really great at. They were able to do these camera tricks and do really cool shit to make something look real that wasn't. And I think that might be permanently gone in the age of AI, which
I
really
kind of disagree.
I don't totally agree that it's totally gone, because there's enough examples of it working. I think it's just very in our face how much the big studios could not care less about that anymore. Right?
Give me an example of something that works. What do you mean?
So Godzilla -1 opened against the Marvels. Godzilla -1 cost $15 million. The Marvels cost $300 million, and they made about the same amount of money, which is insane. And Godzilla -1 is a thoughtful post-World War II Japanese drama about a guy living with survivor's guilt as a kamikaze pilot who bailed on his duty and doesn't think he should be alive anymore. And the villain of that movie happens to be Godzilla. It's just artful filmmaking that works so well, and it's CGI to the absolute maximum. Or another example is like the Batman, the Robert Pattinson one. Most people don't know, I would imagine even people on this call, that 95% of that movie was shot on an LED wall. And if you look at that movie versus like one of the more recent Star Wars shows, where Disney clearly does not care at all whether you believe all of their sets are in the shape of an ellipsis. That's insane. It's like, it's so obvious. You built an LED wall and now you have to use it. But Matt Reeves does it with the Batman, and all of a sudden you're transported to a Gothic world where you're like, actually, like Christopher Nolan was like, maybe Gotham's like Chicago and a little bit of Pittsburgh. And Matt Reeves was like, what if the entire city was a Gothic cathedral, right? There are still people taking the tech and trying to trick you in a way that's actually like meaningful and artistic. I think it's just in the big budget movies, not only do they not care, but the quality has gone significantly down. Like Gladiator 2 versus Gladiator 1, right? Zach, we could do a whole podcast on this.
Don't get me started.
I know the water tank. I've shot in the water tank in Malta that they used, where they shot. I know the people that shot it, and they still CGI'd the water. That's insanity. Why did you do that? You shot in a water tank and then you use CGI to make water. It's terrible, and it's just terrible work. So I think part of what you're reacting to is what I react to as well, which is you have $250 million to make a movie and you just did a bad job. You know, it's just bad.
Agreed on that entirely. I think specifically though, just like the ability to not know how they did a thing on a screen, to be like, how in the fuck did they do that? I think that's kind of gone, because now we just go, somehow they tricked us with computers. They did something crazy with computers. But back in the day, it was like, how in the fuck is that even possible? What?
Jordan, do you think they actually kind of just popped up a question for me, but do you think it's going to be harder for people to believe the Bible, like believe the stories of the Old Testament, believe the miracles, believe these things in the world of AI? Like, are we going to have a crisis of faith for our kids where it's like, they're just like, oh, that's just made up?
Maybe more believable.
Yeah, I was thinking to say the exact same thing. I was thinking maybe more believable. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I think there's the thing that's been interesting to me. Like I'm like optimistic. Is this going to open up more avenues for people who, again, wouldn't be able to find funding to do this in Hollywood? Is it going to open up that capacity to a whole new group of people? And so again, one example of this is there's they released a couple weeks ago or last week or something. It's called The Life of David, I think, or something like The House of David on Prime Video. And so it's like this series that's like live action mixed with some, CGI stuff, and it's really scripturally based. And so again, I don't know what the process was. You can definitely tell there's some CGI in there. It's not totally believable, but it's not awful. And then the actual scripting is fantastic. And so I'm like more optimistic that, again, there's a whole bunch of just really good, really complex stories in the scripture that it's for the life of me, I don't understand why people haven't been making it. And I think, again, this would be more of the thing would be like the concern I have would be, okay, now you've got gazillions of people who live out in Hollywood who have, everybody's got a script from what I understand. You've got tons of people who've got these scripts.
Everyone left.
What'd you say?
Everyone left.
Everyone left.
Okay. But like, I just think, like, is this gonna expand? Like, you're gonna have like the people who are tangentially connected to people in the film industry is like, are there going to be more of those people who get their projects greenlit with smaller budgets? And so again, you get this mountain of crap at the bottom. Like, that'd be more of the concern, because, like, again, one of the problems is just like, it's not the technical problem. It's something like Emilia Perez, like that movie, which I haven't seen it, but from all accounts is absolute dog crap. Like, it's like insane, horrible movie. And yet, like, there's people who were like astounded that it got selected for Best Picture, and yet it still got selected. So like, it's one thing to actually be able to do, like, mechanically do the work and create these films. It's another thing to just be like, all right, there's like the taste involved of the audience is something that's a moving target. And that's something that, like, you can have people actually learn to embrace and like garbage stuff. And so that's that'd be part of the concern too. It's like, no, it's like we go to the grocery store and almost all the food is just atrocious, and yet people are still buying it. People are still eating it. And so, like, that's a concern as well, that I'm somewhat optimistic that it, by virtue of being able to create better content, and by virtue of people who are smart and who are, moral and ethical and also have really good ideas, like, I'm hopeful that they're going to be able to get their content made, and then it won't be so much of an issue, or at least there'll be more to contrast how bad, just ethically and just aesthetically, some of the stuff that's being lauded out there right now is. I don't know if that makes any sense. But.
So Zach, you've touched on this point a lot, which is we're entering the age of discernment, which is to say it's all going to be AI, but what's going to matter is like, oh, I have to actually think about, because you're going to see Trump, like, doing something that is just absolutely insane, and then you're going to see another, like, the footage of the exact same time, like the exact same angle, like the exact same thing happening. It's a totally different thing, and we've already seen some of this too. But you're going to have to decide as a viewer, what do I believe and what am I going to believe? How do I discern the truth here? And I think that, to go back to your question, JD, I think that is a training process that everyone's like, you do not have the option to not think anymore. You can't just turn on the TV and turn your mind off and be like, yeah, I trust the news anchor. Definitely. No. You have to now think. And what that's going to do is it's going to force people into this pattern of like, if I don't think, I'm going to get burned. I'm going to get scammed. I'm going to get like my relationships are going to be destroyed. Like it's a whole thing. And then that, jumps back into so what do I think about God? What do I think about the Bible? I need to actually like really go through the steps and the processes of thinking through this as best as I can. And then also learning the tools about how to think better, going through logic and rhetoric and understanding, fallacies and the whole argumentative process of convincing yourself or persuading yourself or other people. It's going to be interesting.
Do you think enough people care to think, though? Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, so this is what I was going to talk about, JD. I like your term, Zach. I call it the trust economy, which is basically what we had before mass media came about, right? Which was you only really can trust the people that you see face to face and that the people that have earned your trust. And I think that's what we'll return to. I think it's going to be a brutal adjustment period because we've had a very long run of, and all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, at some point have seen a news story that fits something that we wanted to be true and just believed it before, right? Like we can all probably point to hundreds of those, right? Where we go back and like, that didn't turn out to be totally what I thought it was, but I definitely wanted that to be true. So I believed it right on its face. And I think this group of guys is very committed to truth. So we're probably on that bleeding edge of like, all right, I just don't want to be deceived. Whatever the answer is, I'd rather know the answer. And I think what you're getting at, Bonder, and Zach, you as well, is like if you, as much as you don't live in reality, you will get burned by not living in reality. Like there's no other option. Like if you believe that sugar doesn't make you fat, you're welcome to believe that, but you will get fat, right? It's that's that sort of like bringing up of reality. As much as you want to believe the deception that's being offered to you, you're welcome to do that. You're just going to get met by the brick wall of reality, right? And we have Zach and I have a more inappropriate way of saying that as well, but probably not for the podcast.
Well, and I think another thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say like the other thing that's the instant feedback of like mockery, that's I think like the fact that if you say something stupid on the internet, you can immediately get get ratioed within 30 seconds by some anon account. Like you could be the president of the United States and get immediately ratioed, and there's nothing you can do about it. I think like that is a healthy corrective. I agree.
It's interesting to actually think about the like Bitcoin ramifications of that, of like Zaps and Bondor and I have talked about this, but the like Nostr is an interesting protocol because it's essentially creating a new social security number, but like a social security number that's your NSEC for trust, where it's like, hey, you have this identifier now that you can take with you. I know Fedi allows you to take it different places. Nostr, you have yours. You can use it on Zap.stream. Like there's a lot of different of those protocols, but it's interesting the thought you had of like the punishment layer, I guess, on top of that of like, it can be instantaneous where it's like, hey, I said something factually incorrect, and you could actually have tech that's monitoring things. It's like, hey, this is the truth. You're getting into then arbitration of like, who's the arbiter of truth? What is actually true? But there can be like instant ramifications outside of mockery where it's like, hey, I had a instantaneous zap of my wallet got docked, 20 sats or whatever it was because I said something that was not correct. And I was intentionally trying to mislead people. I don't know. It's interesting. Just a thought.
Yep.
Go ahead.
We're talking about how you can fake things in media. You can, you had that meeting with Trump and Zelensky, and a lot of people created these ones where they all of a sudden got into a fist fight or like throwing each other.
That wasn't the real one?
Stuff like that. So
it's hard to believe that was real.
It's hard to discern the real thing from the thing that AI created. And within storytelling in Hollywood, that is going to happen with some dude in Bangladesh is going to make a movie that people are not going to be able to tell is not a Marvel movie. It'll be indistinguishable from what Hollywood is putting out, which is kind of exciting. It's also nice that we have this thing that unites us, Bitcoin, where you actually can verify that something is real and has taken place. And so in the world of imagery and storytelling, how do you verify anything anymore? So there's some beauty to that because, there's going to be a lot of trash at the bottom, but there's going to be people who were held out of Hollywood. There was no way in their entire lifetime they could ever break into the industry. And now they're just, if they're good enough, they're just going to be able to do it from anywhere in the world.
What's kind of interesting is you think about what storytelling is. It's this, let's go back like more traditional filmmaking. It's a bunch of people who are basically getting together and they're basically making up a lie. But the lies all serve a much bigger truth. The movies that we all agree were fantastic were in service of something much larger that was true. So it was like this organized lie in order to express a superlative truth, which I think is still totally viable in the AI world. But it begs the question of like, what is it about those stories? It's like the phrase, like that rings true. Like when you hear a truth, you don't need a bunch of fucking explanation behind it. It permeates through your body and you go, that's right. And you don't need like a whole thesis on why it's right. Usually if you need a thesis on why something is right, you're wrong. You're doing mental gymnastics to justify something that's obviously clearly not wrong on the thin slice first reaction. So, it's like the same game is being played where the lie, a lie gets all the way around the world, gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. The truth is always behind the lie, but like a glacier, it just demolishes those lies over time. And those lies go by the wayside and the truth continues to propagate and permeate. I don't really have a point, more just of an observation of like what storytelling really is. Kind of an interesting little,
Well, yeah,
that's why
I think that's the positive. Yeah, go ahead, Anton.
I was just going to say that's why Hollywood's failing, is because it's not because AI has opened the floodgates of filmmakers. It's because they started telling crappy stories. They started making bad movies. They were making their own sea of garbage. And so the truth is the movies are bad.
Yeah. Because they're not getting it. They're not attempting to get at any kind of deeper truth. They're literally just fucking propaganda.
Well,
yeah, they're making
they
money
think it's a deeper truth, but it's not. It's just like some BS, like.
Yeah, it's self-serving. Like they're telling self-serving stories rather than audience-serving stories, because like there's so many of these things where there is no demand for the stories that they're telling.
Yeah.
Like there is no demand. Like nobody wants to hear a lot of these stories. Nobody wants to, that's just the reality. That's why if you don't get good ratings, it's largely because you're not telling a compelling story. There could be other things, but like one of the things is like you're not telling compelling stories that actually relate to the real people. And so I think this is the thing is like when these guys are getting so much money, like when the checks are so big that you can afford to make a vanity project that is literally just in service of you or your boutique ideology, that that's true of you and 20 people in in California or something like that. Like it's the incentives are misaligned. And so this is where I'd be hopeful that as you move to scarce money, like you move to like people where this is real decisions that have to be made. People are not going to be as willing to just cut the check for something that just is in service of a director and 50 people in Hollywood. Like they're gonna be more incentivized to try to make things because their money won't be able to be made as easily by getting cheap loans or whatever. If you return to like a real cost of capital, like I'm more optimistic that you're gonna start to get stuff produced, content produced. I know you guys don't like that word, but like films produced that that are actually in service of people and society as a result, instead of just again a small group of people who have weird views on the world.
But shameless plug for Indie Hub there. I mean, like,
hey,
to your point,
I was gonna say that.
you like, to your point, Jordan, about getting ratioed on Twitter, that used to be called the box office. And if the fucking receipts weren't there, you didn't have a fucking career. Like they voted you out immediately. And
the audience did.
Exactly.
The audience did.
Exactly. And when we use when we get back to, the idea of streaming value per second watched, and people are actually voting with real money, all of those incentives get realigned. I mean, right now the money is coming from publicly traded companies. Those are a few people that have agendas. But when the audience gets to start to vote again with actual value, you're going to see you're going to see society reward the stories and the truths. To your point, like if you say something that's not true, you're going to get ratioed. If you tell a story that's bad, you're not going to get paid. So if we can realign those incentives correctly, the cream will rise to the top. I mean, there's no question.
Reputation
Jordan,
is gonna be really important in the film world.
Yeah.
Agreed, Jordan. I made this point on your podcast a while back, but basically that money printing era in Hollywood, what we now see is this massive contraction. It's been going on about 18 months, but that money printing in Hollywood flowed all this free money that was literally just printed. There was no extra consumer demand, and we went from a film industry that was about 2x consumer demand to a film industry that was about 6 or 7x consumer demand. And then the interest rates rose and the free money train stopped. And there's this massive contraction, and there's all this hand-wringing in Hollywood, and people blaming people like David Zaslav for cutting things at Warner Brothers and that sort of thing. This massive contraction back down to what the actual demand was. And if you look at theatrical revenues, they haven't actually moved very much. They've gone down by like 3-4% a year, which is a very minor contraction, right? But this devastation of Hollywood is literally just going from 6x revenue to 2x revenue. And it was never there, right? It was a shell game the entire time, and just returning back to that. I'm optimistic for that, right? Even as it's pretty devastating for my industry. I'm optimistic that resettling around reality is the only way that it moves forward in any form. Like, there was never going to continue while we were completely in fantasy land about what the consumer demand actually was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys think the share? So I think it's interesting. AI kind of feels like a modern day Babel, where we're getting to this, like, originally everybody could speak the same language, and then Babel happened, and then everybody was kind of bifurcated in their own little pockets, like tribalism again. And I feel like it's going to be interesting. You're going to have those pockets that can now, it's like, if you want to make an anime movie about the alphabet stuff or whatever it is, like, you can do that, and you can make one that's like hyper focused on like what being pansexual is or whatever. And I'm just like picking something that's so specific, but you can do that. And if you want to try to tell a good story about it, your market, that's that really small fringe market, will be able to tell you instantaneously you like it. Or it's like, hey, I'm an aviator and I want to make something about like really unique, intricate systems about the difference between fly-by-wire and OG like flying with like actual hydraulics. Like, you can go in and you can try and like make these nuanced pieces of content. YouTube is a little bit of that, but I think what we're in for is actually a flippening, to use the eth term. You guys use Solana, right? But like a flippening of storytelling to where we'll actually get a new mainstream, if that makes sense. Like, we're going to get a new way for people to all be on the same thing. I hope it's Indie Hub, but it's going to be a new way for us to talk about what's kind of coming out, or what's that shared experience of the entire world. And I'm curious to see what it's going to be, because it's going to be interesting.
I do agree, JD. I think that's a good analogy. Like, we are definitely bifurcating. No question. And the question is, how long are we going to bifurcate? And then where is the party going to be at after we all decide that bifurcation wasn't the greatest thing ever?
Party's going to be with the Bitcoiners.
Yeah, no doubt. These studios and the platforms, legally, they own a lot of these films. So they own like the Miramax library. They own certain titles. And so companies like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, HBO, Disney, whatever, they're going to have older films. And if you want to go and stream those movies, if you don't want to just steal them or whatever, you're going to go to those platforms. They're going to use those things. There are going to be people that continue to use those platforms. Some of them may fail, some of them may succeed. But there is, and this is already happening, going to be a whole new round of filmmakers who can either use Bitcoin to finance movies, use AI tools, make them much cheaper, and put them on their own platforms. People will go to places like Indie Hub where they can spend the little amount of Bitcoin. They know this filmmaker is not going to put, what if it's the leftist crap that's getting ham-fisted into storylines. I'm not going to get any of that. I'm going to get this certain type of movie. This person's got a new one coming out. I'm going to pay like 1,000 sats, and I'm going to sit down and watch this movie, and it's going to be exactly what I want to see. And it's going to, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's going to be the new mainstream, but it's definitely going to be a lot of really good filmmaking that you can go and pay a little bit of money for and get a really good product for. And it is going to decimate this old structure that's existed for however long it's existed for in its current iteration of Hollywood. That is dying, and a new thing is rising up, and Bitcoin is going to definitely help that, because people are going to pay in Bitcoin to watch the stories.
Can you guys answer an uncouth question that's totally off topic, but actually kind of relevant? Do you guys think slavery comes back? And I actually mean that in a hear me.
We should call that the title of the episode. That would get some clicks.
Hear me,
bro. Everyone in Fiat World's a slave right now, but
Yeah,
but
it's been alive
actually,
since 71, dude.
So that's
Slavery,
actually the
underrated or overrated?
thumbs up, thumbs down. But in all seriousness, like, I'm very curious, because I'm going through the Old Testament right now, and it talks about like, as Moses is handing over the new promised land to the Israelites, he's basically like, hey, you're going to put up these new stone tablets that are kind of big, and you're going to write all this stuff on them. But one of the like big sections in there is basically about like slaves. And it's like, hey, if you're a slave, you can get out of your slavery at this point in time. But if you don't want to not be a slave anymore, then your master is responsible for you. And so where I'm going with this is like, are we going to get to like a new serfdom, or like are we going to get to a different alignment of things? Because we're taught with all of the myths, right, that Hollywood perpetuates. Slavery is bad, but at the end of the day, when you really think about it, like, if all you want to do is scroll on TikTok and find somebody you can go bang on Tinder, you're already a slave. So, like, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Go ahead.
Well,
Zach.
Okay, I'll go first, because your follow up will be more important. Like, I've talked to all you guys about this, I think, individually, but I have this like spicy take about AI kind of being the rapture a little bit, because there's a bunch of people who are not, they're not going to be able to discern the truth, and their responsibility of following the truth and being productive within the truth and moving humanity forward, moving consciousness forward by being servants of the truth, you know, they're just going to be thrown back in the fucking washing machine until they figure it out in the next 6,000 years or whatever, when their soul comes back, and they got to figure out who the fucking boss is. Like, you have to decide that you're a servant of the truth, that you're a warrior of God, however you want to say it. And if you're just going to get totally overcome and overtaken by technology, AI, Tinder, whatever it is, you're just a slave to dopamine, to JD's point. So I think that this technology, back to, to the point of being the age of discernment, all of this technology is forcing us to ask ourselves, who is the boss, and what are we doing? What is the truth?
Yeah. I think one of the things, I can't remember, we've read, so on the shout out to the Thank God for Nostr podcast, go subscribe. But we talk about this a lot. We talked about like AI and like VR and stuff. And I can't remember who we were talking about, but basically his contention, it was some well-known billionaire. It might've been Elon. I don't remember. It might've been Zuckerberg, but basically his contention was, it was this pretty cynical take of, there's going to be hyper wealthy people who are going to actually be able to afford to travel and to, like, afford life and do all these things. And then there's going to be people who are just, they experience all those things virtually. So you're going to have like VR, you're going to go on like a VR vacation, and you're going to have like your VR porn. You're going to have all these kind of things. And so like he just had this idea, this vision of like a, again, it is kind of like it's very dystopian, but of like where you have large, where you have large income inequality, and you have this, you have like assets, this extreme asset thing where, again, even in the best case scenario, the people who are rich today, they're going to get Bitcoin, and they're going to be able to have even more Bitcoin. And so just like this idea of, like this being part of the use case for, for AI, and this part being part of the use case for VR, or, whatever it is, virtual reality. Yeah. I just think like I could see it getting really, really bad in a lot of ways. We could keep going down that path. I did have one more question for Zach, like in terms of the festival. Like, here's a question. So this would be like a more or less less awful use of and a less this would be more fun use. Like, was there any talk of doing like a kind of like a choose your own adventure story for like some of these old films? So like if you're looking at somebody like Miramax and they're trying to figure out how can we monetize these existing properties that we already have. Here's one example. So on the Rewatchables podcast, they do this. They have like all these categories that they go through, and one of the stories or one of the categories is, would this movie have been better if it had Tom Cruise or Tom Hanks? And so I'm like, could you see a world where you can take some of these old movies and you could literally pop in Tom Hanks like to this movie and like experience all these like parallel universes? Like, could you see something like that happening? Like, obviously I think it's possible to actually do it, but do you think like that would make sense on the business side of things, or would the interests align in any way to kind of make that happen? Something like that.
Before you answer, we did an entire podcast on this. But,
Oh,
Yeah.
did you? Oh,
Go on.
no.
Yeah.
Go listen
Exactly.
to that podcast. Never
Yeah,
mind.
exactly. And I'd like
to figure out what number it is, but
yeah, well,
There's
you know,
only
I
8.
think yes, it's possible. Choose your own adventure has actually been a thing, just in theater, like live theater,
Okay.
that was a format for plays for a long time, kind of like 3D movies, just never really took off.
Okay.
I think it's possible, but I think what's actually going to happen is the choose your own adventure AI generated stories that are the most fun are actually going to be video games.
Okay.
We're basically already there. And as AI starts to kind of program, program like imagine Skyrim, but where all of the NPCs are AIs and they're having organic conversations with you. I think that's going to be infinitely more stimulating than like watching the same script or story structure play out with a new face on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it might be interesting for a little bit, but I don't know if there's going to be any big viable return on investment for doing something like that. And then
Sure.
you're also dealing with rights issues.
Yes,
You know-
that's kind of more where my question was coming in. Like, how does that work? I know people are super protective over rights and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and likeness and then so
Yeah.
whatever.
they're already doing that, and they're already gonna continue doing that. That's just
What's interesting though on this whole thing though is actually Blizzard used quite a bit of AI in and I think I'm like 90% correct on this. I don't play video games, but I saw and I was reading something about like Diablo 3 or Diablo 7 or whatever the hell it is right now. In the new Diablo 4, the way the dungeons are made is actually AI generated, which is, it's like they basically have plot points in them. It's like, here's the big bad guy. You got to have some of these things in there. But the theory behind it from an engineering perspective is it's like an SVG graphic, if you're familiar. A PNG is like an image, right? Or a JPEG that you're more traditionally aware of, which is essentially like the computer has to know, okay, pixel 1 is white, and then pixel 2 is blue, and then pixel 3 is this. An SVG is a math equation. So you get to a point where it's infinitely, stands for scalable vector graphic, infinitely big or infinitely small. And so what's going to be more interesting is actually, it's essentially using geometry. Like if you guys know the like the perfect like circle thing that goes all the way down, I'm blanking on what it is.
yeah.
I
but
got
it's
a
like-
C in geometry. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Fractal.
obviously, yeah, it's
fractal. But you're talking about procedurally generated.
yes, and so
content.
it's going to be awesome. Thank you, camera, for freezing at this perfect moment in time. But it's like the point where I'm going with this is the choose your own adventure piece, to Zach's point that I totally agree with, is actually going to be a misnomer, because you don't actually want to choose your own adventure. Like if it really comes down to it, what you want is you want to go on a quest and you want to know what you're questing for, but you want to be surprised on the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the journey will change, but the destination is the same.
Interestingly enough, like if you look at it from that context, JD, like if you want to choose your own adventure, you get to go be a filmmaker and you get to make a movie using AI. You now are choosing your adventure, and then all the people who don't want to choose their own adventure get to like, oh, I'll go on that one with you.
Yeah, but I actually think what you just said is unique, and I didn't even think about that until right now, and just kind of using that framework that I just set up. It would be really, really interesting to have Die Hard where every single character is Tom Hanks, right? Or have Die Hard where every single character was Tom Cruise. And I just mean that in the thing of, it's like, the beauty of this choose your own adventure of the future is not necessarily that it's choose your own story, but it's going to choose your own band of motley characters to live out. It's basically Dungeons and Dragons, but you know, with a little more defined storyline to it.
I mean, we already have that with memes, right? Like the Smash Mouth, where just
Yeah.
the song is just hey now, and it just goes on.
Yeah. I'm just imagining again. I was imagining something like again, yeah. So it'd be like Jerry Maguire or something. Again, the incentives don't align for them to actually go back and touch something like that. But if there was, it'd be like if there was a project, it'd have to be less loved. It'd have to be some kind of project that was like more middling. And they're like, hey, maybe we could, you know, if we changed out this actor, or again, you take like this new actor, we popped him back in there, you know, how would it? And so like there would be some sort of intrigue from that standpoint.
What I would personally love to see though are actually things that died because of somebody dying. So for instance, like
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
love to see
that's a good
what
point.
Batman 3 would have been if Heath
Let's
Ledger
go.
hadn't died. Right? Like
Yeah, I
that's
don't know
what
if it
I
would've
would
been any
love
of it.
is like
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. Yeah.
I appreciate this as a thought experiment, but as fast as AI is moving, I don't think we're anywhere close from AI being able to
that, okay.
replicate a great actor giving a great performance that they prepared for and executed. I honestly don't think it's anywhere close. I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be funny, especially for more middling things. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you tried to recreate with AI what Heath Ledger did in The Dark Knight, it would be so obvious that it wasn't him. Even
Yeah.
if it looked the exact same, I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
Okay.
I
Cool.
think
Have you
I'll
you guys
just say
ever
this last
noticed-
piece on that? But
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I'll just say this last piece. I agree 100% with what you're saying, Corey. The I guess the piece where I'm saying though is the beauty of like an LLM or the large language models for AI is putting in like you've put in this framework, and so more of what it is. I actually think it wouldn't work unless a human did it first. And I guess that's where I'm going is like Heath put in all of that effort to create that Joker. And so it's like, what is another existence or another premonition of that Joker in that world based on AI? Now, again, AI is going to make different decisions than Heath would because he's going to go have lunch with somebody and they're going to give him an idea and it's going to be like that. But I do think it's just an interesting thing. But I do think a human would need to prime it, the prompt, right?
What's both very cool about AI and can be horrifying, and if you've ever watched Black Mirror or read any old science fiction that is no longer science fiction, like anything that you can imagine that AI is capable of doing, it will eventually do. These things all will eventually happen. Like eventually you want to be the main character in Die Hard, get in VR, and it's no longer Bruce Willis. You are that person. And then like think of like an Apple Vision Pro, and you can take a movie and it will just expand all the scenes. So now you can watch the movie, but you can also see like everything else that's going on. But I will just say this, I am confident from like a biblical perspective that there's nothing new under the sun. Even though there's all these advancements, we're still just human beings, and we like a certain type of storytelling. And everything that is going to come already in some version has existed in the past before that technology existed. And so in the future, we still will like a very similar type of storytelling. And I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I think what we consider to be Hollywood is cyclical, and it's all going to come back in a new form with new technology, but still the same.
So this is kind of a question for the group. But how many of you have heard of the philosophical idea of a view from nowhere?
Nope.
And no takers? Okay, so the idea of that a view from nowhere, it refers to this idea of we all have a perspective, right? So like Anton's perspective is going to be different than my perspective. You know, we see some of the same things because, you know, we live in proximity to each other. So we like interact at the same places. But fundamentally, our perspectives are completely different, right? Despite the fact of all the things we have in common. North America, for instance, just a huge thing in common. Now, everybody has their own perspective. And then those perspectives have problems in that it's hard to arbitrate truth between perspectives that are in conflict, right? Now, if you have a perspective here and you have a perspective here, the guy who has the perspective way up here can see the whole map and understands that, like, oh, this guy's not seeing this thing that's outside of this guy's field of view, and vice versa, right? And therefore we can reconcile the conflict, right?
It's like that picture of like you've got like a cylinder and a light shining in two different angles, and on the shadow of this looks like a square, and the shadow over here looks like whatever.
Exactly.
And it says this is true, this is true, and then the overarching is this is truth.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Perfect. Okay. So with filmmaking and with all the other mediums and creative endeavors, we are telling a story from a perspective. Now, what gives that perspective meaning is that it's our perspective, and we can, you know, have interacted with this, our reality, and it, you know, other people have similar things, and so there's a relationship there and all that. Now, AI also has a perspective. It's not a different, like, it's not a different perspective each time. It's like just a universal perspective, and it's not God's perspective either, because God would be the ultimate perspective, right? But AI only has the one perspective. You have to train another AI model to get another perspective, whereas a filmmaker will have his own unique perspective, and a different filmmaker will have his own unique perspective. And there's thousands and thousands of filmmakers, and they're all going to have their own unique perspective. And I think that is where it's like the economics, unless they're able to figure out a way to make AI crazy cheap, where you can just run and train your own AIs for a couple $100. Like, it's, bro, the human experience is just expansive beyond what computers will be able to do in terms of storytelling, in terms of producing content that's new and unique, because reality is informing us of our perspectives, and then we get to respond to that and have a new story, a new take.
Yeah, one of the things that was really clear about the films from the AI Film Fest was that everything came down to writing, basically, and your specificity and prompting. And that specificity is coming from your own perspective, to your point. And there's just an infinite amount of iterations of that. It's inconceivable.
Hopefully humans continue to use AI as the tool, and AI doesn't use us as the tool and put us in little pods where it sucks the heat energy out of our bodies.
This sounds like a really great idea for a movie.
Like a good movie. I feel like I've heard of this movie.
Cornhub, the movie.
Oh, that's my second favorite movie title of all the titles.
All right, team. This is
think we're think we're near it.
Wrapping it up.
If you're into supporting filmmakers and you want to fucking stream them value, go to indiehub.studio. Hit me up at IndieHub. We'll give you a discount code. It'll be dope. We're new. We're in beta. It's small. It's growing.
That's what she said.
I'm new. This is beta. This is beta.
All right, guys.
Cheers.
Peace.
Got a good thing coming, and it's all I